Can a man serve evil, yet still do it with honor? In fact, can he fight so honorably that his own enemies respect him? What do you do when a man who fought for the Nazis refused to fight like them? A man who showed remarkable personal courage and care for his soldiers alongside tactical brilliance. What category does this man fit into? Does he fit into a category at all? The man we'll be talking about today is Erwin Rommel, his life, his leadership, and the legacy that he left. Alright, you guys, so today we are talking about Nazis. Now, I'm not going to say this is going to be my most controversial episode, because it probably won't, but every time you're talking about Nazis, you never know. So, yeah, we're talking about Nazis today, specifically Erwin Rommel. He was a general of the Third Reich, and he saw action in France early in the war, all the way down to North Africa, where he gained most of his reputation as the Desert Fox. So before we really get into the meat of this episode, we're going to do kind of a short overview of Rommel. But before we do that, make sure you guys like and subscribe this video. We have a very big announcement coming up at the end of this video that I'm very excited to talk about. And yeah, make sure to share it with your friends. It really helps. Yeah, so this is the civic mandate. Let's get straight into it. To give a short overview of Rommel's birth, he was born on 15th of November, 1891 in Heidelheim during the German Empire. So if you guys remember from our earlier episodes in this series, we did one on Kaiser Wilhelm, and this was during Kaiser Wilhelm's reign. He was born in Kaiser Wilhelm's reign. Obviously, he was born after the dismissal of Bismarck, and although Germany was the most powerful empire on the continent at that time, they were starting to see their first signs of collapse and crack within the upper echelons of the government. At the age of 18, Rommel joined the infantry and studied at Danzig in the officers' school. So Rommel was obviously, even from a young age, noticed as a brilliant officer. He didn't necessarily come from a high-born family, but he still was recognized as having a lot of potential to be a very good officer. So he studied at the officers' school in Danzig. In World War I, Rommel had experience in the Romanian campaign in Italy. He was an artilleryman. Rommel ended the war as a captain and was incredibly decorated for personal bravery and strategic brilliance. He did come out of the war with many awards, and he was really starting to make splashes in the general officer pool of the German Reich. Now, of course, Germany does fall, and he ends up working for the Reichswehr in the Weimar Republic. So during the interwar period, Rommel, he still commanded his 124th Regiment and was involved in quelling rebellions. Now, this is a really interesting point I really want to hit on here, because what you see here is the difference between Adolf Hitler and Rommel during Rommel's time in the chaos of the Weimar Republic. I'm doing an episode on the Weimar Republic right now for a separate project that you will hear about very soon. But while I was researching this, the Weimar Republic is chaotic. You had paramilitary groups that numbered in the hundred thousands of people. The Ruhr Red Army had almost 500,000 members at its peak. That's insane. Think about that. Even not comparing it to American population, that's an insane amount of people to have in a paramilitary group running around. In the Weimar Republic, of course, what the Reichswehr, which was their military branch, was limited to only 100,000 men under the Treaty of Versailles. Not nearly enough to deal with a lot of these paramilitary organizations. But the interesting thing about Rommel is that he didn't use violence in a lot of these instances. Instead, he used, to quote, sheer force of personality to quell a lot of these rebellions and riots. Kind of different compared to Adolf Hitler's leadership, in the sense he would use full force of his paramilitary organization that he ran to destroy all the other organizations. Obviously, he destroyed the brown shirts. Whereas Rommel, even though he was in the military, he did know, these are my people, this is my homeland. he understood the needless violence that would come out of completely crushing these protests. Another difference here between Rommel and Hitler is that Rommel and Hitler both believed in the stab in the back myth, which is the idea that Germany never could have lost World War I. There's no way they could have. So someone on the civilian side must have been stabbing them in the back, stabbing the soldiers in the back while they were away. But Rommel, so they both agreed about this. They both agreed on the myth, but Rommel attributed the issue to economics, and of course Hitler put the blame on the Jewish race for losing World War I. Under Hitler, Rommel commanded the Hitler Youth, and many times attempted to roll up that organization into the Wehrmacht and kind of out of the Nazi party because he saw that polluting the waters and resulting in incredible fanaticism. But the move was refused multiple times by the Nazi party chairman, which is interesting because even then he understood that there needed to be a separation between the fanatical arm of the German Reich and the military arm of the German Reich. Rommel believed the Nazi party racial ideas to be incredibly absurd, and he clashed often over the treatment of Jewish peoples. Before and during the war, he would not carry out genocides. I think that's a point in his favor. In the opening days of the war, while commanding panzer divisions, Rommel was on the front lines with his troops directing the operations, and we're going to get into some stories today about insane things that he did. But even here at the Meuse, when they were crossing the river, he got into the water himself to aid the sappers who were attempting to cross and move the pontoon boats. He even took a turn on a light machine gun to help stop the French advance. This was a man who had a lead from the front mentality, something, as we've seen throughout history, troops love, because it shows that their general is willing to share the danger with them, and he certainly was. As commander of the Africa Corps, he continuously outmaneuvered and outfought significantly larger armies than his own, and held on far longer than possible into the landing of the US in Morocco. So the North Africa was always going to be a loss. There's really no way that they would have won. But Rommel behaved himself quite well. He was a brilliant strategist. His tanks were constantly running low on fuel because the supply lines through the Mediterranean were being disrupted by British naval vessels and airplanes. And really, he was dealing with undermanned forces, and he still managed to outfight the British and hold on. And then, of course, the U.S. landed in Morocco. And then while running the seawall defenses in France, Rommel added the significant obstacles like the tank traps, the barbed wire, on the beach that hindered so many of the landings. That's part of the reason the landings went on for so long, is because the tanks couldn't make it to the beach because of the tank traps in the water and the mines and the barbed wire. By 1944, the supply lines were terrible anyways, and the men he had manning the seawall were completely undergunned, undermanned. There was almost no regiment that was up to its full strength. And that's just simply because its supply lines by then were shot from Allied bombing. But Rommel did what he could with the men he had. And as part of the attack on Normandy, Rommel's command car was attacked by a Allied Spitfire, I believe, and he was forcibly removed from command due to immense injuries to his head. And then, of course, Rommel, during the war, repeatedly requested Hitler to seek peace with the Allies. He recognized that the war was not going in their favor. They needed a peace deal. And he later became part of the resistance against Hitler, although notably, he never asked for Adolf Hitler to be assassinated, particularly, mostly because he believed that would cause immense chaos, and in the end would be far worse for Germany in the long run. But he did ask for him to be removed, and that's part of why he was part of the resistance. Once Rommel's place in the resistance was discovered, he was forced to kill himself. What we see here is a man who has a complicated history, and I would go so far as to say he was quite moderate in the regime that he was a part of. So now we're going to get into 3 points where I feel we can look at Rommel in a different way than perhaps he's always represented or looked at. Rommel was a man of his time and his circumstances, and he's often discounted and slandered for his role in the Nazi Party. His accomplishments are denied or minimized because of it. However, 2 things can be true at once: his allegiance, at least at the beginning, to the Nazi Reich, and his superb command style and tactical skill. In this next section, we will get into these 3 points: his military brilliance, his conduct in war, and his moderation within a very, very radical regime. So the first part of this is his military brilliance. And this is often debated, was it all circumstantial, his victories, was it simply because compared to a lot of the other generals in the German Reich, he was the best out of all of them and all the others were pathetic. And although many of his exploits were indeed propagandized by the Nazi Party, and that makes a lot of people want to discount them, Rommel was a very skilled commander, something he showed both in World War I and World War II. He was particularly good at aggressive and swift attacks, and it obviously did very well when combined with German blitzkrieg tactics. Particularly, something I want to hit on here is he showed a lot of brilliance when it came to deception and surprise. Even in the first weeks of the war, he saw the importance of masking the true ability, the true numbers of your force. He used this in France by burning buildings to cloak his movements with his panzer divisions. And of course, he used the similar tactic in North Africa to also inflate his numbers. In North Africa, to combat the issues of supply lines, reducing his military capabilities and his offensive projection, he made dummy tanks to inflate his numbers. Rommel was a master of illusion and rapid pincer movements. He used what he had at his disposal, which wasn't much due to the cannibalistic nature of the German military at this time, and he was quite successful with what he had to work with. Now, the second part here that we're going to be getting into is honorable combat. The war in Africa has often been described as a clean war, obviously a marked difference to the Eastern Front or even the Western Front once the Allies landed in Normandy. This was mostly due to Rommel's sense of honor in combat, a sense that was sadly dying out in the 20th century. He did not target civilians and did not take part in any Jewish extermination that the Nazis were putting on, and refused to kill his prisoners. He was even praised by his enemies in North Africa as a gracious man to fight against. He represented a dying age of combat, mutual respect, and upright behavior in battle. Something that would have been commonplace, but sadly was lacking in the 20th century. Additionally, as said in the opening part of this video, Rommel was not afraid to get his hands dirty along with his men. He was injured many times as a result of it, sometimes seriously. He led using a lead from the front style, encouraging his troops and showing he wasn't afraid to share in the danger, that he wasn't just going to sit back in his command tent and let them all die on the front lines alone. No, he was out there riding his jeep and checking in on his troops, inspecting his men. Even the last day as they were leaving North Africa, he was out there inspecting the troops who were defending the rear guard. Insane. This man was loved by his troops, and for good reason. He had a genuine concern for them and often would forego the military formality of common soldier to general. I think this is probably because of his experience in the infantry before World War I. He even led scouts in front of tank spearheads and lay in the mud alongside his troops. He was adored by those under his command because he was willing to share in the danger that they were sharing in, rather than just sending them out to die. That is something that's admirable in any general. Sadly, that's not seen in modern combat anymore, or even pre-modern. The last point we're going to get into here is moderation. Moderation in a regime that was radical to its core. Rommel was never supportive of the Jewish extermination policy and often fought with the administration over the implementation of it. Even in 1944, Rommel was attempting to make peace with the Allies and pressuring Hitler to propose a deal. Of course, Hitler never agreed to this. This is part of the falling out that Hitler and Rommel had, the deterioration in their relationship as the regime slowly continued its march towards destruction. Early on, Hitler saw promise in Rommel. He saw the brilliance that was there that sadly was lacking in many of his generals. He saw the possibilities. But, of course, Rommel was not a radical ideologue. He shows remarkable restraint in an evil regime that had a massive psychological effect on many people. This showcases his independent thinking that he was capable of. In the end, he lost faith in Hitler as a leader and he joined the resistance. And although his role in it can often be debated, he still strove to remove Hitler from power. That was his goal. His moderation is eventually what led to his tragic end in the Nazi regime. And yes, it is tragic. He died attempting to save the land that he loved that had been perverted and destroyed by the Nazis. This was a man who loved his land, who loved his troops, who loved his job, and he was killed for it. He is killed for his moderation. He was killed for attempting to stop a regime that had no hope of ever winning. And for that, I would call that tragic. In conclusion, Rommel was a man who fought for a dark regime. But regardless, he made a powerful reputation for himself due to his strategic brilliance. He pushed back against the brutality of the regime and refused to take part in their evil deeds. And it's important, I think, here to not blanketly attack all members of an evil group. Rather, I'm confident you will find that occasionally there are complicated men like this that don't fit nicely into any categories that we so want them to. So for that, I would caution you, before you write someone off because they were a Hun, before you write someone off before they were a Nazi, before they served under Kaiser Wilhelm, or they were a Confederate, look into them. Maybe they're a little more complicated than you might think. Hope you guys enjoyed this video today. This is the first episode in our 4-episode expansion to our misrepresented figures. And I'm very excited for when this comes out. And I'm curious to see your guys' thoughts. So comment down below if you disagree with me completely, and we can fight in the comments. It'll be great. We're going to duel. Besides that, I do have a very big announcement, which is that we are currently looking at some more options for our other channel, which is called Motivation Mandate. You guys go subscribe to it if you aren't already. We are looking at some interesting vlogging options for it. Perhaps Wildland Fire, maybe. I live in, I'm not telling you where I live. I live in a place where there's wildfires. So we're thinking perhaps there's an option there to do Wildland Fire vlogging. You know, I don't know if that'd be something interesting to you guys. We do a lot of hikes too. Doing vlogging like that would probably be pretty fun. We do a whole lot of exploring. So we'll see. I'll put them out there and see if you guys like them. And yeah, if you do, then I'll keep putting them out. Either way, guys, we are going to do our cold outro now. So without further ado, hope you guys have a great day today. Enjoy this cold outro, and God bless. If one were to look for General Rommel, perhaps you'd look in the command center, mapping strategies and tactical maneuvers. Perhaps you'd look in a book of vile men, alongside others such as Genghis Khan, Mao, and Stalin. Or you'd look in the concentration camps of the Holocaust, perpetrating one of the worst genocides in the world. But you wouldn't find Rommel in any of these places. Rather, if you wish to find Rommel, you would find him on the front lines, with his troops lying in the mud right alongside them, facing fire just as they did.